Thank you, councillors, staff, members of the public, anyone joining online. It's 5:30 and I'll declare this briefing session open. For those who haven't attended these briefings before, this is not a decision-making meeting. We'll be discussing the agenda which is before us for decisions to be made next week. Councillor McCleary is on approved leave. The rest of us are here. Welcome back to those who have been on holiday. There are no announcements from me. We do have some declarations of interest, councillors. We have an item, declaration of interest from the CEO, in item 10.3.2. That's a financial interest. He will leave the room for that item. We have a declaration of interest from Councillor Ben Andrew on item 10.2.1, as he is a member of the South Bunbury Rotary Club. I will also declare a impartial interest on that same item, as I am an honorary member of the South Bunbury Rotary Club as well. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you. We do have minutes from the Audits Committee. It's the only one there, as per normal, the chair of that group. If there's anything further to update, Councillor Andrew from that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was the last audit meeting, as obviously we'll have a new committee once post-elections. There was some interesting information in there. It's probably worth members taking note of the Regional Capitals Australia summary. I also found the internal audit reports very enlightening, so I hope the public do have confidence in our internal auditing and the work that we are putting, I guess, into making sure that things are correct and above board. I think that's about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We do have a deputation, councillors, on item 10.4.3 from Mr. Brenninger. As per these briefing sessions, that's at my approval, which I approve. We'll deal with that when we get to that item. Item 10.1.1, councillors, the Bragg Strategic Action Plan. Any questions on this agenda item? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask one question. I think I've asked this before, but the director of the gallery is referred to as the Bragg team leader and not always director. So why is that so? I thought that the leader of a gallery should be the director rather than a team leader.
CEO, any comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the city structure, that position is equivalent of a team leader position, but we have nominated and allowed the director of the gallery to use the title of director because it's more appropriate for the arts sector, but within an organisational structure, it's the equivalent level of team leader.
Thank you. Further question? Follow-up, Councillor Stiff.
Then who's the director of the art? Who then is the director? Like, sorry, I'm just...
CEO.
So the director of the gallery is Michael. In terms of our organisational structure, Mr. Barber is the director who has a responsibility for culture, including the Bunbury Regional Art Gallery.
Councillor Andrew, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to item 1 for the advisory group recommendations, obviously they've got the word commit there. I'm assuming it's not necessarily going to be a guaranteed commitment at this time. And I know it's only, but it's in that recommendation.
Do you have a question in that, Councillor? It's more of a statement. So that, obviously this recommendation has been come up through that panel that was come up with. So I think there was a pretty strong emphasis for that panel to have a level of a commitment from the city that they will be committing, obviously with this with the ambition to deliver the project within the next 7 years. So that's what the advisory group has recommended, and council has, well, and the executive now put into their recommendation as well. So CEO, anything to add on that, I guess?
Through Mr. Mayor, only to reiterate that the advisory group was very keen to see a strong commitment from the council to advance the project. And so I guess the wording, even in our first draft, to be clear, we never included that piece in there. But on further discussion and deliberation, we decided that it was worth putting for council's consideration that commitment to this project.
Councillor Steele?
Has there not already been a decision to commit to building a new art gallery once we had all those drawings done 3 or 4 years ago? Was that, what was that commitment for then? To have the drawings and then do nothing?
CEO?
Through Mr. Mayor, essentially yes. I think there was a commitment to fund the concept drawings and the consideration of that project, but it was never funded nor was formally considered by council to progress it to construction phase.
Councillor Stepp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a further question to Councillor Steele's question and the response. Given the fact that we have some concept plans, will the new committees have a look at those concept plans? And further question, if I may, will the old plans from the past be provided to those committees? And also, the Three Waters Precinct plan, those plans, could they also be provided to the group, just so that the group will have a wholesome knowledge of the past of attempts for this council, sir? Will that be provided?
Yes,
to
to all three, in short. But yeah, obviously there's a fair bit of work to happen in that space. The CEO, I'm sure you might have some further comment on that as well.
I think, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that the advisory group has seen the concept drawings that were prepared by Bollig Design Group for adjacent to the current Bunbury Original Art Gallery. Certainly in the recommendations from the advisory group, 4.1, the group is keen to explore what is the best site in Bunbury, and so there may well be that site considered as well as other sites prior to a final decision being made by council as to progressing the project, not only in location but scale and funding.
Councillor Steele?
I've just noticed number 4 about re-establishing the advisory group, which I think's great. Was there also consideration to having a separate, prior to what it used to be, a standalone group that wasn't run by council?
In terms of a board that
Yeah.
runs the
Yeah.
CEO?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think on page, there's reference to this in the agenda on page, just bring that up, sorry. I think where it's not included in the recommendations, but it was further consideration. Now I can't find the spot.
Yeah, it's on page, I think it's through the funding model. I think there was in there as well.
So as part of the foundation, for further consideration be given to the, I guess, the governance model. That's not included in the recommendations at this stage. Certainly the purpose around this is really looking more at the actual physical opportunity for the gallery rather than the operating model.
So the direct quote there, Councillor Steele, is in establishing the Bragg Foundation, council will continue to be the governing body for the gallery, but consideration should be made in regard to transferring governance over an independent board in the future. And I'm just guessing some of this work through this terms of reference and subcommittees would potentially recommend or talk about how that happens. Page 52 of 173. Councillor Smith?
Mr. Mayor, I have a further question. Has any consideration been given at this point? If this gets through next week, has there any consideration been given to the personnel on each of those subcommittees at this stage?
I wouldn't
No
have thought so.
thought been given to that yet?
I wouldn't have thought so yet. It talks about the terms of reference to be established, so that would come up through that. But CEO, any comment on that? Not yet, Councillor Smith.
So that will be decided once, if this gets through, then will be decided by who? This council?
I think the advisory group would make those recommendations back to council.
Okay.
Further questions? Thank you. 10.2.1, councillors? Questions on this? Councillor Turner?
So did they go through the due diligence and apply for grant funding this year?
CEO? Don't believe so.
Through Mr. Mayor, I don't believe they formally applied. Last year they were given a grant, I believe, not an event funding. So, pardon me. So this was originally raised with the city in March this year, and unfortunately it wasn't considered as part of the budget deliberations. Decided to bring this forward to council, and I should declare, or should make it very clear, that PR 5083 is that discretionary fund that was put into the budget for council only to consider expenditure. So it is that discretionary fund, which I think is highlighted under the financial implications of the project. But no, Councillor Turner, I don't believe they actually formally sought funding.
If I can ask, sorry, a couple
Yeah,
more
sure.
questions.
Yep.
So previously they have received funding through the grants funding round.
CEO?
Previous years, through Mr. Mayor, there's been a range of activities undertaken. So going back probably to 2016-17, the City of Bunbury Ranger team, I think, managed the traffic management. And then the city provided some funding to the Rotary Club of South Bunbury to actually have people trained and accredited for traffic management. I think we did that for 2 years, perhaps consecutively. But come that period of time, or perhaps with declining membership, I'm not quite sure, but there weren't sufficient numbers of people to undertake the work. So it's been a little bit ad hoc, and that's why point 2 has been included in this executive recommendation for council to consider whether they want to make this an ongoing funding arrangement to secure the event each year, because it is a bit, I appreciate it's a little bit late again this year, but I think either they receive funding from council or they don't, and that might put the traffic management component of the event at risk.
Councillor Turner?
Just, sorry, one more. If they don't have traffic management, will the event still go ahead?
There
Or
was
can
one-
Can it go ahead?
There was 1 year where there was no traffic management. I think it was 2 years ago, and it did. And I think that was addressed in the comments there in the letter that it potentially was a little bit unsafe. So that was just open slather almost at that stage, because the event will likely proceed in terms of Christmas lights being up, and if there's no traffic management there, what that looks like. Councillor Steck?
No further questions, sir.
Sorry, Councillor Steele?
How much money is in that 5083, and obviously to cover the $6,000? And have these people ever come in and spoke to us councillors? If so, I might have.
30,000 is the budget amount. See how you can answer both.
Correct. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Correct. There was originally an allocation in the draft budget of $50,000, and then there was the additional funding provided to the Stedford. And I graciously recommended that you drop your 50 to 30 to keep the budget in balance. And there was some sage nodding, so we accepted that as an agreement. That's what's in the budget now, is $30,000. I don't think there's been any other expenditure against that line item, Mr. Ransom. No.
In terms of the second part, I don't believe there has been a briefing. I'm not even aware that they know this is coming up to council. I don't know if you let them know. You did, but we might have that word to them.
Only because I have absolutely no objection to this, because that started years ago when I gave them some of my council discretionary funds back in probably 2010. That's how far it's gone back. But, so I was just wondering, why, my question to them, I suppose, would be, why don't they have a bucket at the beginning that people can just chuck some money in, and maybe that, I would say over 3 nights they could more than likely raise $5,000, and not that, because I just have consideration about doing this ongoing, that's maybe something I'd like to suggest with them. I know
Sure.
that that might be suggestion rather.
And
It's
that's-
not a question, I suppose.
That's potentially why the CEO has split this into two parts as well. Is that's up for us to consider that, well, A, this year, and then B, going forward, and maybe that's something that we can consider of ongoing allocation funding, maybe a reduced amount while they become self-sufficient, or however that may be. But that's obviously up for the further budget considerations. Councillor Turner?
Oh, can I just ask, this last round that we had of grant funding, was that the full funding or was that less than usual, please?
CEO?
Mr Barber, you able to address that? I'm not quite.
Through Mr Mayor, I think there's another round for the community grants, Neighbourhood Connect, I think it's called, but there's another round coming up, so it's not fully expended yet.
Oh, Councillor Gwen?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So would there be any, if this was to go ahead, would there be any considerations to ensure that they do traffic management training within their organisation going forward?
I think they still have some qualified traffic management, qualified management people, and I think this is about, even when you do have traffic management personnel, you still need to have the plan, and you still need to have like supervisors. So regardless, they would have to get quotes, and that's this will be where they'll have one or two of the managers around, and that's where the cost is accumulated for. So they still have volunteers who will be part of it, who can do it, of course, but they still need to provide a plan and some of that equipment as well, which obviously they don't own. But yeah, I believe that there's still a number of qualified who will be volunteering. And I don't know if there's anything further to add to that, CEO.
Mr Harris might want to explain the traffic management. There's different levels of accreditation for different roles. Can you just explain that briefly, please?
Thank you, through the Mayor. There's three levels. There's essentially an advanced traffic management person who can draw up the plans and do that. Then there's a level down which is a traffic management controller, and they can put the signs out in accordance with the plan, but they still have to have the senior person come and check to ensure that it's been done. And then you've got the events traffic management people, which essentially they've got approval to put the signs up. They've still got to be checked by a qualified person, and then that's got to be a regular check throughout the event as well to ensure that the signs are up and in place, because obviously if there's an accident or an incident down there, that'll be the first thing that gets checked. So there's those three levels. So they would definitely, they would have done the training on the events one, but they are still required to have an advanced person down there to run the site in effect.
Sorry.
Councillor Quane?
So will there be a requirement that they undertake further training to reach the qualification that the director just told us about?
I think that'd be outside their scope, I would have thought. It's a professional role, but CEO?
So through Mr Mayor, that's not the intention of the funding. The intention of the funding is allow them to conduct the event with them securing those trained people to run the event. I think as with any not-for-profit and service organisation, you can train 10 people up. There's no guarantee that they'll be even in Bunbury at the next event, which is, I think, is what has happened in some of the past years.
Councillor Turner?
Yes, sorry, I didn't really get the answer I needed. What is the total amount of grant funding? 2021-22, I know we dropped down a bit, we 10% or something like that. 2022-2023, did we have the full funding back up to the top or?
Across all categories?
Yeah.
I don't know if we have that on hand, but control. If not, we can certainly provide that.
I get myself into trouble here. I think it's in the realm of $440,000, but we'll take that on note and give you that absolute correct answer.
Provide that with the funding categories as well, allocation to each category. Further questions? Councillor Gassip, yep.
Just wondering, pro rata, per dollar, how many visitors or residents that come to this event compared to other events that we fund? Just to get sort of a return on investment. It says here thousands of local residents and visitors. Can we take a rough guess?
I'm sure
whether
they're,
it's a
they're
good
diff-
investment.
differing, there'll be a wide range of events with very wide range of outcomes, Gabby, Councillor Gassop, I should say. We do have some information on event funding. We could potentially try and feed something in there, but I think in comparing it to every event might be difficult, Councillor Gassop.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you. 10.3.1. Thank you. Councillors, with 10.3.2, this is the confidential attachment. To save anyone going out of the room, come back now. I'm just going to put this to the back of the agenda in case there's any questions around the confidential attachment. If that's okay with you, we'll move along and come back to that at the end of the meeting. 10.3.3. Thank you. 10.4.1. Questions on this, councillors? Councillor Quain?
Is that 10.4.1?
This is 10.4.1, the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Plan.
Through you, Mr Mayor, does the city have a duty of care to have a community safety and crime prevention plan? And if so, does it speak to that in the plan?
CEO, do you have an answer for that?
Through you, Mr Mayor, my belief is no. So the Local Government Act requires the local government to consider the good governance of the district. So as led by our community through our community scorecard, the matter of crime and community safety was raised. So there's no obligation on the city or the council to make any decisions around that. The council had asked that a document be prepared. This document's now here for council's consideration, and I'm assuming that this will be the first of perhaps many iterations of a document into the future. But there is no, this duty of care matter, I think, is one of, I don't know, I have some nervousness that people are using that language when a discretionary project of the council is being considered. So I think there's a duty to look after your community as best you can, but not in a legal sense, other than what is prescribed in the Local Government Act. And a community safety plan is not prescribed as a requirement for a local government to produce under any other form of legislation, like we have the Record Keeping Act, which requires local governments to prepare a record keeping plan. We have Disability Access Inclusion Plan, which is required under the Disability Act, but certainly my understanding is there is no requirement in legislation for the council to produce a community safety plan.
Councillor Andrew?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can we just expand on that a bit more? I guess, what is the risk to the city, I guess, in adopting a more proactive approach with duty of care regarding safety?
CEO?
So just to, sorry, can I just ask you to rephrase it? So what is the risk to the city of being more proactive?
Being more proactive and accepting a duty of care in regards to
By
crime and
adopting.
safety.
You've stumped me. I'm not quite. So I don't believe there's a
Would you like me to-
reputational risk if Bunbury's reputation is seen to be not safe. So the council, as I see it, through the input through our community scorecard, is trying to demonstrate that there are a number of players in the community safety space. The City of Bunbury is one of those players, and it's clearly articulated in a document what role we play. So I see it as being proactive in producing a community safety plan for consideration by council. Other local governments may have gone further. They may even have, as we discussed before, security patrols. They may have other elements of more extensive CCTV coverage. I guess that's up to each community and each local government terms of its capacity and its community demand for that level of service. So I don't think there's any risk, and again, we come back to this duty of care language. I don't think it affects our duty of care. I think it shows the community that council's listening to the community and is acting on what they've said is an important priority to them in trying to enhance community safety.
Sorry, Councillor Andrews?
Sorry, thank you, Mr Mayor. Considering that one of the preferred crime prevention and community safety strategies included targeted security presence at high-risk locations, how do you feel that we're achieving, I guess, that fear within the community? Page 130, if you're looking for it. Sorry, how do you feel we're responding to that perception with the community and the need for targeted security presence at high-risk locations?
Do you mean like the increased police presence? Is that correct?
CEO?
Oh, sorry, so through Mr Mayor. So referring on that page to the area to the right, the right-hand column. So this is feedback from the community and key stakeholders, which included the police, and these were the areas where it felt that the city and the stakeholders that are involved in the community crime prevention plan could actually make a difference. So the city is not going to put increased police presence. That's up to the police to do that. So I'm not sure if I'm going to actually be able to answer your question, other than to say you need to go back to the document. I think it's about page 4 of a document where it actually indicates what the role of each of the stakeholders are. And so that particular piece of work would actually be a police issue, not the city's issue. I'm not sure if I've addressed.
Councillor Steele?
What Andrew is saying, that third paragraph, to me, that's what the community and stakeholders want in that paragraph, not what the city.
The question from Councillor Andrews is how do we think, how's the CEO think the city are going in that area effectively or addressing that area? So
Yeah.
I took it as,
Yeah.
and the CEO's attempted to answer. Yep. Councillor Stepp?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is that when we take the Bunbury bus station, how does that targeted security presence in high-risk locations and placemaking and activation with either maintenance or improved lighting is a scorecard for not activating that area when it's a at-risk area? So what will this document do to assist to prevent the severe crime that occurs there?
Councillor, I had a conversation with the CEO prior around, there is the action plan there that does have a range of actions, and I've indicated about how we, how as a city we report back on those, and it does indicate there will be reporting back to that group, which will continue, and then reporting back to council. But I did ask the CEO that earlier, so I just wonder if the CEO has any further comment around that in terms of what you're referring to there. It probably falls into the theme of the activated spaces in there, which does have a number of actions on things that could be done. So my question, I guess, in following up to that to the CEO is what the next steps from the city? At this stage, there's obviously action plan. When will we likely see some of either budgeted figures or further reports back on how some of those are being addressed?
Mr Barber may have something to add to this, but I think our involvement would be to continue to work with those key stakeholders to understand what are the issues and in what locations within the city. You would be aware, elected members, that there's a budget allocation to start to look at fresh master planning for the Bicentennial Square. So I think that'll be a key element of what does that look like, and assuming any further design work there would include the CPTED principles, so designing out crime wherever possible. The city's done some work even on Carmody Prinsep Street, which is actually improving that area, creating interaction with other parts of the CBD that probably wasn't there before. There's ongoing conversations with PTA around where buses go. So I think there's a number of activities that may not look like they are directly crime or safety related, but they probably all impact on each other. So I think our reporting process will need to be probably sharing information of data, and we do rely on data. I would say that the city had some issues at the bus station, as you're well aware, when we ran the visitor centre there, in terms of some of the matters that occurred there. And there were 1 or 2 serious events there, which has probably given that area the notoriety that it currently has. I don't think it's necessarily ongoing, and we haven't really heard of any significant issues down there for some time now. So that's in relation to the bus station. Overall, with the plan, I think Mr Barber will need to collect data, report back to council. I think the question was put to me earlier before the meeting whether the actions in the document were specific enough or whether they're a bit too generalised. I think that's some of the work that we would need to do to be able to report back to council, and if council and the community want more clarity around those actions, then developing those actions and budgets associated to implement them.
So I guess a follow-up on that, part of the reporting and monitoring recommendations on the last page of the report, would that be in the vision the reporting would be reporting back against each one of those action items, all 8 or however many there are of them on there, but indicating what is happening in that space? Would that be the reporting mechanism that the city would be indicating would be the case?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes. And the re-establishment of that group, I think, is important as well for that information flow. I think the other thing that was discussed extensively through that working group was the reinforcement to the community of what we are doing, because a lot of the items that came up out of the community consultation are perhaps already being undertaken, but we're not promoting that enough, and there's not enough knowledge in the community of what we are doing and future improvements that we're looking to make. So I think that public information side of things is very important as well, informing the community on how this plan's going and where we're going with it and what we've achieved.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gasson.
It's a little bit out of left field for you, Mr Mayor, and maybe ahead of the curve. Are you aware that this week is Mental Health Week?
I believe I was aware. I think I saw an email, yes.
Yes. You missed a good event, actually. Yesterday would have been a sight for sore eyes or ears, because I was singing at the event. But, Mr Mayor, given that the Work Health and Safety Act now, it has for a while, has included psychological hazard as well as physical hazard as a prevention of those two things as a requirement in the workplace, and does not distinguish anymore between physical and psychological harm. And given some of the, especially federal legislation starting to come through about penalties of psychological harm in the community, not just in the workplace, should we be starting to think a bit more about that in our community safety plan, which is the highest aspiration in our strategic community plan? Yeah, that's one question.
I'll ask the CEO if that was consideration was sought into this particular plan. I know if you happen to read the minutes from the audit committee, there was some information on what the City of Bunbury are doing in that space. So they're in the minutes of this agenda. But from the CEO's point of view, was any of those considerations given during this plan?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I wasn't involved in all the working groups, but I don't believe it was that specific in amongst the working group. This is around community safety. Certainly, I guess there's that community safety is as much a reality as it is a perception, and the community perception survey, being the scorecard, has highlighted this, and that's where this document originally emanated from. So I don't believe that purely the psychosocial safety in the context that Councillor Gassett is talking about is really an employee relationship. But I think from a community relationship perspective, I don't believe it was considered specifically, unless Mr Barber's got any further to add.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think it was raised and discussed through the committee, but there's not, I guess, that level of obligation. As the CEO said, it's very distinct in occupational health and safety legislation, that relationship, but not in terms of a local government towards its community. And there are a lot of other government agencies that act in that space. This was specific about the community safety and trying to improve that overall.
Thank you.
So the main aspiration was that for a safe, healthy and connected community. So I would have thought that given, you know, the interpretations of psychological harm is within that description, whether we should be considering that.
Councillor Gassab, I know you're part of this working group, so I believe it was raised a few times, and this is the report that we have come back to us at this stage. So that's all I can answer on that in that regard.
Okay, final question. Should we be considering psychosocial harm or hazards in our decision-making, how it impacts on the community?
It's not related to this question, Councillor Gassab, this particular item. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Smith?
Mr Mayor, this might be a pretty basic question, getting back to, have we done any assessment on the safety of these scooters, the electric scooters in town? So I had heaps of complaints about them being left all over the place, people tripping over them on footpaths.
Sure, Councillor Smith.
Helmets left everywhere and so on. So do we know?
Councillor Smith, we're getting very off topic here about this particular plan, so happy to raise that outside of this particular item. They're called scooters. Thank you. Any further questions on this particular item? Thank you. 10.4.2. Any questions? Thank you. Seems to have gone on for a while, that one. Ten 4.3. Mr. Redinger, thank you. Welcome home as well, Brian.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I can't tell you how positively excited I am about the fact that the Tourism Working Group has made it to its own agenda item. And thank you to yourself and the Deputy Mayor, the CEO, and Director Gary Barber for allowing me to participate in this as a volunteer consultant. So I'm quite excited about getting this group started this year. I strongly support the recommendations for the creation of the Bunbury Tourism Working Group, subject to a few comments and changes, some of which I've delivered to Gary Barber in an email. First of all, under executive recommendation number 1, it refers to terms of reference, which Gary has nicely reformatted to fit the city's requirements. And I've sent him a few comments on that document via email, which may need to be considered. It's really up to the city to decide if my comments are relevant or not. But one of them was I'd like to reduce the number of members on that group from 11 to 10. It's not a big deal, but the more members we have, it becomes slightly unwieldy to work as a group. So I've made my recommendation on that. Related to executive recommendation number 3, there's a figure there that talks about $40,000 for a consultant, but more importantly, it goes on to say that the consultant will prepare the Bunbury Tourism Plan. That was something that we had not envisaged. We had envisaged that the city staff would prepare and own the tourism plan, specifically in the economic development or Gary's group. I do understand, and I had a separate discussion with Gary today, I do understand that there is a vacancy in that position that from the previous person who left, who would normally be call him the tourism officer or the ED team leader, I think was the former title for that position, and that would have been the targeted position for taking responsibility for having the plan prepared. So as I stand here right now, I don't know exactly where this is going to go. I strongly want this the working group to be formed and have at least 2 meetings this year, recognizing with the elections coming up, new councillors coming in, and then that you have to also then go out to the councillors and say, okay, who wants to be on this working group? So all that process is going to take at least through the end of October and into possibly early November, but I still think there's time before the Christmas break to have a kickoff meeting, form this committee, and more importantly, have a second meeting to say, okay, these are the key priority 1 issues. For example, a SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis be done related to the Boar and various other threats to tourism and visitation, the Bunbury. So that's the kind of stuff we really have to get started this year. The only other comment I'll make on that is I'm going to leave this to Director Barber's attention, but I strongly feel that if you're going to have the consultant prepare the plan with input from the city staff, then $40,000 is not enough money to cover a consultant preparing this plan, because I look at this as being probably overall a 4-month exercise, and the amount of effort that needs to go into a plan, which could conceivably be anywhere from, I'm just guessing, 60 pages thick to 100 pages thick for a local tourism plan that has all the contents that are required. So I'll just leave it as a comment right now for further discussion by the council on $40,000. I think should be at least double to have a chance at preparing a quality plan. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. A few questions, but I'll throw out the floor first. Councillor Stepp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I too am highly excited about this concept. Long time overdue, so I'm going to ask a question that might surprise some people in this room. But given the fact that we have the highest qualified person in tourism and is part of ASWA, part of the top end of the chain in going through tourism and representing us and the regions and everyone else that's part of Australia Southwest, is Mr Mel Osborne. So I think that,
We don't have him for much longer,
I'm
Councillor
going to
Stepp.
ask the question, sir, is it possible that because there is a vacancy in the staff, Mr Osborne, our CEO, is the most senior, opportunistic person to write this report? And I would welcome the opportunity to work with Mel, because he's very clever in this space and he's been our representative. So I'd ask Mel to please consider it, but I'm asking, can that be part of the separation of the other item that's coming further this evening, sir? So 2 questions in there.
Yeah, I don't think we can give an answer just yet. I've heard your point, Councillor Stepp, but we'll take that question on notice. There you go, Mel. We might have a job. Any preliminary? We might potentially discuss that item later as well, Councillor Stepp, but yeah, can't really answer that one just now for you. Point heard, question heard, and we'll just put that aside for a moment. Further questions on this, Councillor Quain?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I too am very excited about this tourism working group, and I'm really keen to know when it's going to be established, and will it be a working group that will be listed when the new council is appointed and all the working groups and committees are up for creation or taking nominations?
Yes. Yes, it will, Councillor Quain. If adopted next week, this will then form part of that, and council will appoint council members to it at the first or second meeting after the council. Probably the first one, when we're doing all the other ones. Councillor Turner.
If we do employ Mel, can we only give him 40, not 80, please?
I've
Councillor
proper
Steele.
question
Yeah,
on that
good.
as well. Like, we've had a person sitting here that belonged to some sort of tourism group. Have we not got a tourism plan already that we are actually following? And I know there's a space available that's from someone that has left, but surely that person would have done some work while they're here to have some sort of plan.
We don't have a direct.
What do we have?
We don't have a Bunbury tourism plan. There's obviously the wider one, Bunbury Geograph tourism plan. But CEO, have you got any further comment on that?
Yes, so I think Councillor Steele's referring to when Williams was here as part of the Bunbury Geographic Tourism Partnership as the manager. So there is a lot happening in the tourism space at the moment, and I agree with Catherine Allsop because there's some state documents that are being prepared. One for the South West region through Tourism WA, which is the Tourism Destination Management Plan, and then there's another document which is the Regional Tourism Development Strategy for Bunbury Geographic Region. Then you have the Bunbury Geographic Tourism Partnership has an action plan, so that strategy is in place and is being implemented. But the purpose behind this, as the Mayor indicated, was to come up with a Bunbury specific tourism plan. It's probably pretty hard to look at Bunbury in some ways without looking at what's happening outside the 8 kilometres by 8 kilometres of the city of Bunbury. And then to add to that, there's another document that's just been prepared through collaboration between Bunbury Geographic Tourism Partnership and ASW, which is a proposal to the state government regarding marketing from the Bunbury Outer Ring Road, the opportunities that might exist. That's been socialised with the CEOs of the other Bunbury Geographic group of councils, and also recently socialised with Don Punch to get his advice and guidance on how to take that into government. So I'm saying there's a lot of documentation. Every one of those documents has got plans and actions and strategies, but I think this conversation occurred around bringing something specific back to the city of Bunbury as a specific Bunbury document.
And may I say, sir, you just demonstrated why you're the best person for the job.
Councillor Steele, you have a follow-up?
No, that's fine, I understand all that, but I'm just a bit flummoxed as to why our team, who are employed by Bunbury, have never had just a Bunbury tourism or anything, because that's who they work for.
If I can, I think it's shaped into the economic development piece as distinct from a standalone tourism piece. So I think if you look at what Bunbury delivers as a local government, between the investment that's been made into, as an example, Coolanbiddy Woola, obviously Bunbury Wildlife Park, our sports piece, so there's lots of work that actually goes into tourism, which is probably not tagged as tourism. So I don't think the need was seen at the time to create another standalone document. I think this request has been generated because of BOR, but also because of Bunbury's sort of in this standalone bubble, which is now going to be more isolated from the predominant amount of traffic heading from Perth south. So it's really trying to address what's Bunbury's competitive advantage, as I see it, and how can we market Bunbury better. So I think this could have been something that had been done previously. It wasn't. The Bunbury Brighter campaign was done. That actually had a tourism focus as well as a livability focus and an investment focus. Bunbury Geographic Tourism Partnership doesn't leave Bunbury out, but it's not a Bunbury specific plan. And the other documents that Catherine has said that the Tourism WA is preparing, they will have some focus on Bunbury, but probably not as much as what we're aiming at with this document.
I've got another question because I don't like the implication that everyone thinks that the BOR is going to be, you know, a big baddie, because those people are never going to come to Bunbury anyway. They were always going down south. So I'm assuming that this is what I would really hope. I suppose my question is, and it's going to be sort of palaver, but I don't want them just to be focusing on, oh, the BOR's going to be taking these people away. So what I'm hoping for that is we're going to sell Bunbury rather than, and make it a tourist destination, rather than trying to be scary that the BOR's going to lose people, because I actually do not think that that will happen.
When answering that, CEO, could you potentially just maybe update us on what, have we progressed any submission on what we're doing with the BOR submission to government, which was another piece of work?
Yeah, so it's all links in, and I think we've been very mindful of not criticising the Bunbury Outer Ring Road to be the root of all evil, so to speak. Depending on what you're doing at Margaret River when you get there, of course. So this has been, I guess our commentary's changed, and we did actually even change a couple of words on our
advocacy piece. Advocacy piece.
I was trying to think on our advocacy piece to talk about the opportunities that can be leveraged from the Bunbury Outer Ring Road. And this document, which has been prepared on the BOR marketing proposal, has used that language consistently through it. It is not critical of BOR at all. It just relates to the fact there will be a change in circumstances, and how do we leverage from that $1.4 billion project to get some better outcomes for Bunbury and Bunbury Geograph. And I think the Bunbury Tourism Plan will need to do the same.
So CEO, and probably just following on from Councillor Steele, you've elaborated a lot, but you've elaborated on what the city is currently doing in the tourism space, but how is that then different to this particular group and what that would deliver? Could you give any definition to that, or maybe Mr. Barber might be able to assist there?
I'm more than happy to not disadvantage myself in my interview and pass it over to Mr. Barber.
So what are we currently doing in that tourism space, and then how would this be different to that?
Through Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm replying to the Mayor, so probably don't need to go through. I think the CEO has probably outlined there's a lot happening in the tourism space that is being done as a region. And I think this working group and the plan that would be developed is specifically about Bunbury, and what do we need to do to, I guess, put Bunbury on the map, and as Councillor Steele was alluding to, how do we leverage off the opportunity of the BOR? Because the BOR brings more people down here, and it's changing their mind of where they might end up going, but it also, the BOR will create a better traffic environment in Bunbury. It will allow better freight movement and things like that. So Bunbury becomes more attractive in some aspects because of the BOR, and how do you leverage off that? And it's also, because it's so much in the public mind that it's going in, it's how do you say, hey, come into Bunbury, look at us now, because it's a bit more prominent because you're getting onto that big road. So I think this plan is about leveraging off that, as Mr. Redinger has said previously around our events as well, of looking at the event plan that we currently have in Bunbury and potentially the region as well, and looking at where those gaps are of how do you promote the city all year round as a destination. And even, I think, this week's discussion with the Turf Club around the Bunbury Cup, does that become a bigger event that can bring people into town, leveraging off what we already have, as well as some of those sporting events. So I think it's probably looking at it at a more strategic level, combining the benefit of events with tourism and leveraging off the benefits of the BOR. So I think it's probably timely, and being able to promote Bunbury as its own entity, whilst also obviously the state and the other local governments through Bunbury Geograph will continue in that role to promote the region.
Thank you. One further before I just go to the next one. And where did the figure from 40,000 come from? Was there any indication on that? See,
Wasn't my quote. But Gary?
Through Mr. Mayor. We've had a couple of phone calls with some consultants that we know are in that space, and they gave us a rough idea. So that was where the number came from. I guess until you actually go to market with a scope, it's hard to get an accurate figure. And I guess, and perhaps that's a further discussion with Mr. Redinger, maybe my scope and what he had in for his scope may be somewhat different. But I guess the working group needs to look at what they are intending to achieve through that terms of reference and what the outcome of that plan they intend is. And then we go out for a quote and we'll have to see what it is. But I guess the conversation we'd had leading into this, we were relatively confident that 40,000 would be sufficient.
thank you. Sorry, Councillor Steck, I know you had a question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's probably more directed to the CEO in relation to this document and the opportunities with the SWOT analysis coming. Have we had any word from an election promise to be able to have a digital sign for Bunbury, because that is a strategic advantage for us to actually advertise all of our events through the community. So where are we at that with that?
See you.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. So the BOR marketing proposal includes a request for funding for signs, two signs, one north facing and one south facing, and as well as static signage, events marketing, destination marketing, and some other collateral, I guess, add-ons through social media, etc. So that there is a piece of work in here. There is an estimated budget for two signs, but there has been no formal commitment by government at this stage. When, when the city met with Minister Saffioti when Bore was first being proposed, and you may recall the decisions at council, sorry, the discussions at council around the northern interchange, and we met with councillors, with Minister Saffioti at that stage. Minister Saffioti wrote to Mayor Brennan at that stage and indicated that there could be some capacity for better signage or improved signage for Bunbury as part of that project. So we've hung on to that piece, and we'll work with Minister Saffioti and with Don Punch and the other local members to see whether we can achieve some significant funding out of that, or for those elements.
Councillor Kozisek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have a query regarding the working group members, noting that Mr Rettinger brought up about reducing it to 10. I actually thought it was only 9, but that's fine. Bunbury City Councillors 2, City Tourism staff members 2, Bungeo's Regional Tourism Manager 1, BVC business members 2. I'd just like to point out that Bunbury Visitor Centre members do not encompass a large proportion of our retail and hospitality establishments, and I think that maybe there needs to be a broader look at including some other members. I think it's a mistake we made when we're looking at the visitor centres. We did not include some of the other retailers that are very much aware of tourism in Bunbury and how it affects our shopping, etc. Or whether we change the makeup or we just broaden the scope a little bit, I'm not sure.
Councillor Kozisek, you obviously have that opportunity next week to make that adjustment to the terms of reference as well. I might just ask the CEO, potentially through the director, on the thought process of how those working group members were determined.
Through Mr Mayor, I believe that the two business people was identified to be one from hospitality and one from accommodation. I think that's how we first looked at it.
So there needs to be a retailer.
Through Mr Mayor, and perhaps if I could just get a clarification from Councillor Kozisek. So at the moment, we're proposing a representative from hotel and accommodation, representative from tour and activity, representative from food and beverage, experience and attractions, the Chamber of Commerce and a community member. So just to clarify the question, is the gap that you're suggesting in the retail?
I think the retail field is lacking there because if you talk to our retailers on any given day, they will tell you how many tourists they talk to. They have a vast knowledge of what tourists do in this town and how much money they spend. And I think that it's a bit of a remiss not to have a retailer included in that proportion. Yeah. Whether we include the BVC would maybe broaden the scope rather than being saying BVC members. We say one hospitality, one hotel and accommodation, and one retailer would be how I would like to see it.
I think potentially make that recommendation if you word something up, Councillor Kozisek, and maybe run it past Mr Barber offline and have that conversation and propose a proposed amendment for next week. If that's something you would like to see, have that conversation offline is probably best. Councillor Steele. Councillor Quain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just reading the background, and it said that on the council meeting 5th of September, council resolved as follows, that council requests the CEO prepare a report to council to consider the establishment of a tourism and events working group by 17th of October. And I've noticed that the events has been taken off the recommendation, and I'm just curious to understand more and why.
That was CEO.
Mr Barber will address that.
Through Mr Mayor. So I guess we already have BIAC, which deals with events in terms of the approval process and some of that other issues to do with events. The terms of reference acknowledges that events, this working group would review the events calendar to look at the gaps in the process to recommend the tourism plan of any events that may be lacking. So there needs to be a very clear distinction between the role of BAC, which is an established committee of council, and the role of this working group. And I guess the distinction is this working group is around the strategic development of tourism product and events and recommendations, and BAC is an approval body and funding body for some of those events. So it's not in the title of the working group because I didn't feel the need, but it's in the terms of reference in terms of looking at that tourism calendar.
Councillor Quinn?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the events calendar, will that be like, for example, when an event happens, they do an event application to the city, and so that event might not go through the events committee for funding, so it might be not funded by the City of Bunbury, but it might be a very large event, and so that really large event, would that, because it's gone and had an event application submitted, so then that event would then be listed on the events calendar?
So the purpose of that events calendar is to bring those potential gaps into that, I believe, Councillor Quain, to make sure that all of these things are captured, and it's looking forward at reoccurring events in the calendar, and then obviously events that are no, but I'm not sure if Mr Barber has anything further to provide to that, CEO.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr Mayor, and it also needs to look at some of the more significant regional events. You know, some of the food events, Lost and Found, which is a combination of ourselves, Harvey and Dardanup, but a lot of the food and accommodation occurs in Bunbury. So it's still important to look at those events. There's other significant events, mentioned the Bunbury Cup before, that currently doesn't go through BAC or have an assessment process that needs to be on that calendar to look at those gaps. And I think it's also the role of this, the plan, to look at how you leverage off opportunities of those bigger events. And there may be a need through the plan to lobby for either a growth of a particular event or a new significant event that has been discussed for a number of years through council.
Thank you. Further questions, Councillor Gassett?
I think, Mr Mayor, would it be appropriate to ask Mr Rettinger about changing the name?
We can't have that conversation here,
Okay.
Councillor Gassett.
All right.
Happy you can have that conversation with him afterwards, and we can have that conversation, but not during this process.
Well, in that case, I'll try to put my question in a question. Can it be taken that if you leave the name as it is, that includes the events, which seems to be at a much higher organisational level than the BAC, so can it be taken that it should stay in?
It's up for you to move next week or
Okay,
have a
all right.
conversation, Councillor Gassett.
And the other question, Mr Mayor, is I suppose was partly covered by Councillor Kosizek. Can we seriously look at having retail representation? I know there's one very passionate retail organisation in town that would love to have some input, and they don't necessarily get fully represented by the BGCCI.
Sure, and that Councillor Gassett, as I mentioned to Councillor Kozak, that's about having a look at that representation that's currently made up. That's what's been recommended by the staff. There's been one suggestion to potentially reduce those numbers, but how that make up is up to council to determine next week. So that might be worth getting together with the staff or Councillor Kozak and having some suggestions to raise on what you think might work well. Any other questions on this item, councillors? Thank you. Good discussion. 10.5.1. Questions on this? Councillor Gassett.
Mr Mayor, can we consider having a councillor and or elected member and an officer, city officer, rather than two officers in this committee?
We could consider it. I'll ask the CEO to provide any input to why it was recommended for this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. When we did consider what WALGA had written to each local government and considered that if it's the first point of contact for road safety issues, it should be the administration rather than elected members. So I guess we elected to make the recommendation as is, that we would have the director and a manager as the primary points of contact.
They do recommend in their letter that we could consider an elected member as well. I was on the Roadwise Committee 15, 18 years ago. I was chairman at one stage. So it'd be nice if we can consider it.
It can be considered next week. Everything can be considered. Councillor Steele?
Does that mean that we could form a roadwise committee again?
Not everything can be considered. CEO? Comment on that?
I think Mr Harris would like to comment.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. There are no more roadwise committees that are supported by WELGA or the roadwise program. You can run a roadwise committee. I think in the southwest there's one left. That's still operational. This is WELGA's new process, if you like, in regards to roadwise. It's a conversation we've been having with WELGA for the past couple of years, and it's more about putting the skills back into local government employees or staff around the consideration of road safety as a primary factor when we're doing our design works around the place. This gets us to use the moniker about being a roadwise council, where road safety is a first consideration. Also gives us that opportunity to upskill our staff around road safety so that it's a foremost consideration when we are doing our work out on our roads.
Just further on from what Councillor Gassop said, I just note that here it does say at least 2 people, but so if you've got 2 staff, then I don't think that's a fair representation.
Can look at raising that next week, Councillor Steele. Again, if there is suggestions, sure. If there is ever suggestions, as we indicate, the best way to deal with them is potentially raise that through the CEO prior, so they can just get some advice around that. And if you want to proceed with that, some kind of change, getting the CEO's advice is probably the best start. But then we can obviously go on that the following week or when we decide next week. Thank you. All good. Thank you. One more. Next questions, 1053, the road name request, a couple of these. Councillor Steele?
Yes, I noticed that we're naming it after a man. I'm just wondering when we're going to start naming some roads after our women within the city of Bunbury. I'm not being facetious, but the last few roads we do know, I know we named one up. Somewhere up here, that was after a local man as well. This is after another man. Surely we have women within our city that we can put their names forward to be considered to have a name named after them.
CEO? Yep, no, CEO, just if you want to provide any feedback on this process and what...
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So only that I think the approved list of names is now very short, and I think we did discuss whether we should have added in a piece or work out how we went back to elected members to get a new number of names to add to the current list. I think Mr Harris was only 3 approved names, 4, so I'm glad it wasn't 1. 4 approved names left on the list, and I think we're certainly in need of reviewing that list and getting feedback on what that list should comprise. So happy to take that on board, including other male, female and landmarks and Indigenous names.
Further questions? Thank you. Further questions on this one either? Councillor Kozisek first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering whether consideration was taken on how easy it was to pronounce those names in the heat of an emergency or having to get an ambulance to go to your property. Because I think the second one has lost me completely.
CEO?
I don't have an answer for Councillor Kozasek's question, but we can talk to the staff who are involved. Mr Harris, can we talk to the team who are involved and come back offline?
Through you, yes, we can. It was a name suggested by a third party, though, so it's not necessarily a staff recommendation. They were the 2 names that were put forward by a third party in regards to this.
Councillor Kozisek has a follow-up and then Councillor Turner. Yep.
I just wondered, could somebody please pronounce that second one for me?
No, I think, well, second one in the first one in the recommendation, second one in the actual council report, yeah.
New York.
New York. I'll go with the CEOs, New York. New York. Councillor Turner? Oh. Councillor Steele, was it?
Are there any houses that will need to, I'm just looking at the map, so are those houses, will they be on that street and have to be renumbered? Or are they on like Hudson Road? I'm just looking, or is that the one, I suppose just behind the library there? Will they be on that street? Sorry, yes. The ones on the left-hand side, oh.
Through CEO?
Mr Harris, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I believe the two that are on the left-hand side will need to be referred to on as that street. The others are all have frontages on existing streets. Those two actually had frontages onto the cul-de-sacs that were there previously.
And have those people been made aware that their address will change?
CEO?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll have to go back and check. It's not just us running this project, it's been run in conjunction with Department of Communities, and I'm not sure whether they are Department of Community Housing or not, so I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Thank you. Take that on notice, thank you. Further questions? Thank you. And 10.5.4. Questions on this, plenty of road names. Just don't read it, Councillor Steele. Any questions on this? Thank you. Councillors, we come to an item that dealt with behind closed doors, so we'll ask the member of the public, thank you for joining us. We'll be dealing with this matter behind closed doors and the other matter as well.